guys?
It's like,
It's good.
I was saying, Aleron, before you came on, Jamie last night, when we first put that on, just as it started, and Jamie burst out.
All right, guys. So let's get started here. We'll start with give Jez a little time here to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you got coming out.
Okay, thanks, Bo. Basically, for those that don't know me, I'm Jez Cajiao. Don't worry about pronouncing my name. I don't, so there's no need for anybody else to get stressed over it. I've got 2 series at the moment. I've got The Rise of Mankind with The Age of Stone as the first one that's out in that, and hopefully I'm aiming to get the Age of Bronze out for around beginning of December. That's post-apocalyptic sort of dungeon core. It's set in Newcastle here in the UK, and it's pretty dark and grim and violent, which is all my stories. And there's also The Bright Blade, which is the first book in the Underverse series, which there's 6 of out at the moment, or the 6th one will be out on Tuesday. And that's, as Aleron and I were discussing last night, that's nearly as big as his biggest book.
Almost as big.
415,000 words. It's just that little bit close.
Basically just missing the
Beat him
tip,
next time.
so it's fine. Who notices?
All right.
I'm Carney, author of The Realms, which begins with Barrow King and has caused lots of confusion with Chatfield's 10 Realms, which we realized came out within like a couple weeks of each other, and we're both like, oh, dude, we didn't know we were naming our stuff the same. But the series has done ridiculously well for me right out of the gate, which was really cool. 7 books out with a short novella as well. The 8th one will be out next year and it'll be the last one in the series. So I'm both nervous and excited about that one. I also write a series called The Quintessence, which is more cultivation LitRPG. 2nd book came out earlier this month. And then I'm also been working on a serial for Vela called Saga of the Maker, which I was going to write anyways, and then just decided to try that out, toss it up. The response has been great, but the platform so far seems a little iffy. But I was never really planning on using that as my main thing for that. It was going to publish it there when I had enough to rapid release the first 3 books, just do it on KU like normal. And this just kind of gives me a need to put it up at least, 1 or 2 a week. So it focuses me and forces me to write. So, but glad to be here with all these other great guys.
Right on.
Hi guys, I'm Shemer Kuznits. Don't worry about pronouncing my name. No one can really do it. I'm probably most known for my first LitRPG series, Life Reset, the tale of a small green goblin who can. I also wrote Air Force, which is more sci-fi. And my latest book was a new series called Biomancer. Right now I'm working on Biomancer 2 and on the first stages of planning a whole new series, which I'm very excited about. So we got that to look forward to.
All right, I'm Aleron Kong. I'm a physician by training, but I've switched over to being a full-time writer in the last 3.5 years. I'm the author of The Land, which is my main series of 8 books. I have a second series, God's Eye, which just debuted last year, so it's got 1 book out. And I'm converting my stuff into a web novel now. And I'm really excited to be here with these awesome guys too. So that's me.
All right. Sounds like you got a lot going on for all of you.
Keeping us off the streets.
Yes.
So, first starting question, what inspired you guys to decide to incorporate town buildings into your writing?
For me, I think I sort of picked that I would start. I don't plan. I'm a pantser very much. I just make it all up as I go along. So I sort of picked how I was going to get into the world. And then once I was there, it was a logical thing that as the story progressed and as the characters sort of talked and I just wrote down what they were saying, that suddenly there wasn't a choice, that I needed a base, I needed to build from it. So it was started to plan it out, but until that point, I really hadn't planned it. So I had to sort of stop and go, what the hell's in a town? What do you do? When you start looking around at the maps in the area and go, what else is here? What else is there? So yeah, it was, I don't plan. I really should.
I think I had a slightly different approach. I'm a history major by trade, so whenever I get that initial idea for a story, whether it be character or plot or whatever, the first thing that just naturally comes out is I got to create what happened before, because all of my stories are deeply influenced by stuff that in the realms, for example, happened a couple thousand years before. And I don't sit down and do the Toki and write it all out. I just write out a couple of major points, have why the history influences the present, and then in the realms, for example, he ends up gaining an old dwarven city that's been abandoned, and the reason it was abandoned and the reason he had to go and clean it out was directly related to the rest of what was happening. So I don't have a lot of the mechanics like Aleron does. It just, to me, it's more of a fulfilling of the backstory and history, and the town is almost a character in and of itself. That's the kind of usually approach I take.
Yeah, definitely the same thing for me. I've always been a Civilization nerd. I think it's the greatest games ever created.
Definitely.
So when I was gonna start writing the books, it was enjoyable, and then I started doing the town stuff. But then the town becomes its own character, right? It's it evolves. It does sort of various things. It's a lot of fun. So it wasn't really an option for me. And honestly, with my second series, God's Eye, I feel like I'm intentionally trying to even put more emphasis on the town, because I think there's so much fun things that can sort of be done with the building, with just seeing the evolution of it as a whole. So yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of fun. Anyone that's ever done an RTS and screamed because you couldn't get more gold in Warcraft knows how awesome that is.
Yeah, I come from a little different approach than the rest of you guys. I always really loved town building as part of a D&D campaign, because when you go on adventure and campaigns, everything is transient and fleeting. But when your characters build a town and invest time in it, it grows like your own baby, and it really, you leave a mark behind. So when I started out writing Life Reset, I just wanted to build a town, and somehow it got complicated with goblins and people who wanted to kill them, and gods influencing everything, and rogue AIs, but at the base of it, it was town building.
Great answers. So I guess I got this question from Discord. How do you keep track of resources and allocation for the villages and associated systems?
Reference documents, dude.
Yeah, I asked that question of Aleron early on in my career, and he basically said sheets.
Just
whether
a
it's
lot
do you use
of
Google or do you use
I use Excel.
Excel, yeah.
I use Excel. I use Word. I'm told that I'm a dinosaur because I'm not using all these high-fingered whatevers, and I use the words fucking high-fingered. So obviously I'm a dinosaur. But yeah, no, it's just a lot. It's a lot of reference documents, and
right.
I have to check it because I'm got that.
Yeah, I've recently started adding them into what I used to have Scrivener files for each book. Now I just do it by series. I think I saw that from Dawn Chapman, maybe, was where I got that idea. And hers is way fancier looking than mine is. But I just leave all the stuff that I have in random notes on my Remarkable and notebooks. I've just started putting into little folders in my Scrivener file. So when I write the next book, I can go, well, I don't remember what the hell this thing was, and then go and find it. So it's a bit of work to set it up, but once you've done it and just continually add as you write a chapter, it seems to be so much better.
Yeah, very much so. I've started using World Anvil, which is sort of
it looks really cool. I just don't want to learn a new thing.
Yeah, it was basically a case of I was using Excel and it just wasn't working for me, and I thought I've got to find something else. And then finding World Anvil, and of course finding it nearly at the end of the first season of Underverse, and you start so I've started with Age of Bronze with writing that. So every time I come up with something, I make a note of that, put it in World Anvil, put it in the right place. But God, I wish I'd done that so much earlier, because you've got everything that's you can just search, you can pull everything up, and you can explore it. You can zoom into maps, zoom out, click things, and it all works really well. But I wish I'd found it earlier. It would have saved me so much goddamn effort.
Those are good tips. I need to remember them.
Yeah, seriously. I'm right in the chat. If there's any
I'm using Google Docs myself, and I also I track most of the stuff, the big stuff, using the Excel and other sheets. But it's really hard to remember the part that you are currently at the story where you stand. So what I do, I just write comments. I add comments to the relevant text, usually when the day switches. And I just put a list of everything that's relevant for that day. And each day I do this again and again. So I have like a comprehensive list of every instance the town was at that time. And it really helps to track everything like that. But it adds a lot of work because sometimes if I rush the days, like 3 days passes, I can spend like an hour not writing, just filling up charts and tracking resources and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I wish it was only an hour.
But it's nice. It's like playing settlement development game that you invented, you know, by yourself on your own.
No, it's a super nerd moment when you go back through and you're just like, oh, this is awesome. And then you're like, shit, did anyone hear me? That was very embarrassing.
But there's also that bit where you go back through and you go, where'd this come from? I didn't write this.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh man, this is a great idea.
Yeah. People talk about it and go, I really liked it when you did this. And I'm like, what?
Right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to reread all 7 Realms books before I write the 8th one, because I'm gonna be like, there's stuff that I know needs to be addressed that I might not remember otherwise.
Yeah, right. It's a weird feeling when like people have read your book several times and you realize that they're much more proficient with your world than you are, and they're like, "Hey, what about when such and such happened?" And I'm like, "You're making me look bad." Like,
yeah.
So someone says he loves that pun I made in the story, and I said, like, what pun? What they're talking about? Who's the character?
All right. Yeah. What is your favorite building to design, and what was the hardest for you? So,
for me, it's the dungeon that I'm pouring into. I think Dungeon Core is an amazing sort of take on LitRPG, but I'm doing mine slightly different. Like for me, I visualize as like a bonsai tree, where like you can influence it, and then it has an effect that you're not really like seeing happen afterwards. But it's a lot of fun with me to sort of dive into that kind of like mechanic. I'm enjoying it a lot.
For me, I mean, I'm with Age of Stone and the Rise of Mankind series. Very much, it's a dungeon core, so it's. I don't want to spoil anything, obviously, but it's a case of the main character gets control of a dungeon core, but he's not supposed to have control of it. So there's no sort of wiki, there's no manual, there's no how-to, and he's just constantly going, I wish I'd realised that a week ago. I wish I'd done this a week ago, and sort of building things up gradually. And the whole logical, oh, if you do this, you'll get this, but it's not designed by humans. So you'll do this, and then nothing will happen. You'll do this, and you get all this. Hey! And it's sort of trying to balance it all out so you don't overpower things, but equally so you don't have the very, very, very slow creep, because, you know, in a post-apocalyptic world, once everything's gone to shit, you know, it's not going to be, you don't have 6 weeks to plan to do something. It's going to be a case of you fix this right now, or you don't get to fix it. You know, you're dead.
Right. Yeah. Complex building that develops can be problematic because you have to think about how they can rank up and what they will offer later on. And you need to be careful not to mix and match with what you want to currently present, and think how to leave room for more. So those can be tricky.
I have this weird habit of building something up to be really interesting and cool and then killing it for some reason, or destroying it. In mine, without going into spoilers, there was a building that I'd set up as being really important, and then I had the bad guy destroy it because it just felt right. And but I'm like, well, I had some plans for it that I can't really do now, but I follow the story. Otherwise, it's, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot if you don't.
Yeah, you have to listen to those voices in your head.
Yeah, even if they're crazy.
I had a fan like call me like a horrible M. Night Shyamalan, because he says like I just fuck him every time. He's like, you get invested, and then I love this thing, and then you just destroy it every time. I'm just like, dick.
All right. We got a Facebook user who posted a pretty good question. Are there any real world towns, buildings that have inspired your books and towns or buildings?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm literally, for Age of Stone, for Rise of Mankind, it's literally based in Newcastle. So the entire thing, as I'm going through it, you can see it. If you look on Google Maps or whatever, you can see it's sort of going off down this street, it's taking over this nightclub, it's that kind of stuff, which is weird because the other series making it all up to instead be able to literally look on a map and go, oh, there it is. It's both more convenient and also a knacker, because at times you'll go, you're really in the zone, you're writing away, and then you look back at it and you go, yeah, that's not there. That's nowhere near there.
You're like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's interesting. They interviewed Stephen King a while back about that movie he had, like not the perfect storm, but it's a storm based whatever in New England, and he based it on a real town. But like his fans then went there and they're like, this does not add up, and this is not where the street is. And he said it was this massive headache for years having to argue with these people. And he's like, it's a story, dude. It's a story. It's a story. And he said, I'll never do it again. He's like, I'll never base it on a place again because it was flooded with just emails.
I grew up in New Hampshire and would have occasionally random people thinking that Maine and New Hampshire were the same place. And I was a bartender at the time. They're like, do you know Stephen King? I'm like, yeah, we're buds. Yeah. And I'm like, can you tell me where Derry is? And I'm like, sure, it's in Maine. Just go. It doesn't you made it up.
That way.
Probably for that reason, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I take most of my influence from computer games. The standard blacksmith, chapel, and barracks, and all the stuff.
Yeah, I steal my ideas from either ancient history stuff, because that was kind of my focus, and cool book I have somewhere of like what Moria supposedly looked like and all that. So it's a lot of, and probably all of my role-playing game books too. So yeah, real history and then stolen.
Like when I was playing Civ as a kid, I absolutely did learn things about real world technology advancements and how important it is. So I really love being able to sort of incorporate things like that, like the importance of a lighthouse for an early seafaring kind of civilization. And then you can make a magical way to do it, but it still serves the same purpose. I really like being able to anchor it in that, because you do need it. Otherwise you're going to die every time you go half a day out. I mean, it's wild.
All right. Have you ever created a building and then realized that it was too OP or it allows for unintentional interactions?
God, yes.
Yeah.
The book, The Age of Bronze, there's a building in there that I've created that was a gift from the gods, the blueprints, and it's, at the time it was too cool not to build, not to sort of design around. And then I realized that actually if they get a hold of this is going to be, this is going to cause real problems. So I had to up and up and up the cost of building it. And it was just like, just make it a bit more expensive. They can't build that yet, because it's Empire Ascendant that's in, and it's going to definitely change the balance of power. But it's a case of, it would be logical as well to have it in. So if you don't have it, then, plus I'd already written it and it was cool to have. So yeah.
I think it's cool to have something that breaks the template. It's, shine above the others. It forces you to adapt to make the story work with it instead of against it, and it can be, interesting, lead to interesting situations.
That's what actually led me to actually two reasons that my one previously referenced one got destroyed, because it was potentially going to lead to too OP, but it also just fit how the story had to go. So it was accidentally created a problem that a completely unrelated solution managed to fix, and it makes me probably look like I knew what I was doing. Didn't know what I was doing.
Also, one of the best parts about being an indie author is that you realize that there's a problem. And you're like, I'll just re-upload this new document. People are like, well, you said this, and it's like, no, didn't never happen. You're crazy.
Where's your proof?
Yep.
What do you want? Screenshots? Fuck you. That's not happening. No.
Changed it. It's my rules, obviously.
Obviously. Who are you gonna believe?
All right, guys. So let's see. Does anyone consider writing a book that would not be based on a post-apocalyptic world?
Oh God, yes. I mean, I've got a couple of books that I've got lined up that aren't post-apocalyptic at all.
Yeah, none of mine.
And just
Yeah,
sort
like
of
all of
literally-
our books are not
Yeah.
post-apocalyptic.
I only have
Yeah,
one.
we've all got them, but yeah.
Basically, for the most part.
All right, well, that's that.
Killed that one off quick, didn't we?
Yes. What's more important to build, the village or the enemy the village has to fight?
I'd say probably the enemy, because
Yeah.
the village you're responding to or you're building towards something.
Yeah, you're often building to defend against the enemy, so the enemy determines what you're going to do half the time.
I mean, there's an old idiom for writing that if you want to make an amazing story, imagine giving your people something and then imagine horrible things that keep them from getting that. I mean, so the enemies are always the best people to write. I mean, Loki's lines like that adaptation just now were amazing. Like villains are always more fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't remember who said it in screenwriting, but it was basically like actors want to play the villains, so I don't start necessarily with the villains, but I tend to find my villains much more interesting to write than the heroes half the time.
Yeah.
So
I mean, what is it in that original Spider-Man that had Willem Dafoe playing? And he's like, see, this is why you're never a hero, because someone comes up with a really sadistic fucking choice. And it's just such a great line. It's amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't be one of these Mary Sue heroes who's always just like, oh, we'll do this, it'll all be okay. Oh no, we'll just lock them up. No, I'll just stab you, mate. If I catch somebody who's doing all the bad stuff, I'll be like, don't you worry, people, I'll take care of this. I'll just take him around the corner and I'll lock him up.
Exactly.
Take him around.
That's how my
There
older
you
brother
go.
taught me to fight. He's like, look, if he's bigger than you, just sort of let it go. He turns around, you hit him with a brick. You do it real fast, real hard.
So you're just carrying bricks around all day, or?
I mean, you gotta find whatever you want.
Yeah.
Bottle. It's whatever you can find. You know, he's like, if you need to cry first, cry a little bit. Do what you got to do. Then you hit him with a brick.
Yeah, I was very much taught that it's a case of if you're going to fight, if you do an escalation. So if you punch somebody and they punch you back, you do this, they do that. But if you put them down, break their arms and legs, and braid them together, they won't come back for a second round.
They don't come back.
And then you go home for some town building.
Yeah. Like only a
Because
sucker
you
says,
handle
I'm
the
gonna hit
enemies,
you
so-
now. No, you don't do that. You sucker punch them. And then you move on with your life.
All right, normal things make
Derail it all.
Can't. Normal things make great cities. Culture, opportunity, outdoors, hot water, floors, all make places better to thrive. What opportunities will you offer? I guess in your
Magic, basically. I think I don't mean like magic. I mean it's
Shemer.
a lot of our books are escape. They're escapism, so it's a case of you can find a way around things, and you can give a gift with it with magic. Yeah, you can say building something realistically and go, well, it's going to have showers. Fantastic, because everybody wants a shower.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to put in an entire water system, or you can have a magic system.
A magic portal to the realm of water.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and just hope that nothing else comes through, because that would not make it wouldn't be.
I mean,
Nice.
to me, that's one of the most interesting things about not just creating a magic system for how like woo spells work, but how it influences like the technology of the world. Like my third series is basically about an enchanter or a crafter. And he's gonna upend the entire ecosystem economically, specifically of this world, with the simplest, basically, it's a message stone is what I'm calling it. So it's like, what if suddenly there was iPhones available in a magic world? And how much would it disrupt and piss off a lot of people that are going to send people to kill them, because there goes their monopoly.
Yeah.
So that's heavily thought about in this new series, and it's been a lot of fun trying to extrapolate how a society that doesn't necessarily have a scientific method would use and adapt magic, because when it just stays static and no one ever does, hey, what if we did this with this thing? It just seems really weird to me that no one ever tries to figure anything out and use it in a new way.
Yeah.
So that's what I find fun.
Agreed.
Was that everybody? Okay. I didn't want to skip anybody, just making sure. What's your favorite building mechanic that you have added to your world? Yeah, so what's your favorite building mechanic that you've added to your world?
Food. When monsters build a town, everything is fueled by food. You have to have food to raise more monsters. You have to have more food to support your army. You need more food for, to fill out a lot of abilities. And as monsters, producing food is not a specialty. So you have to mass up an army and go conquer those pesky little humans and, ransack their barns and stuff like that. So I enjoy doing that. It's unorthodox.
Monster at heart.
Yeah.
I think for me, the intelligence side of it, because for me, with creating monsters in the dungeon, at first you think, well, what level of intelligence do you give them? Are they a case of they're like simple AI in that they just, you say you're a guard, you stand there and you just guard? Or as they evolve, do you give them more and more intelligence? And then you have an issue where you think, well, how much intelligence do I give them? And at what point do they become sentient? At what point do you start going, well, actually, I've just set up all these guys to be cannon fodder. But actually, that one there keeps surviving and is really, really useful. And I quite like this one. But I could gain more by killing them and having that sort of like, well, what do I do with them?
I really like doing like stuff like the Sea of Chaos. I always love that old Price is Right where everyone's like, get door number 2, get door number 3, and then just like screaming at the screen. And so I like putting like Easter eggs in it with the choices, but I also really love like putting ones up where like I intentionally describe the choice that he doesn't get a little bit better, and then I just get all these emails like, you dumb piece of shit, why didn't you get blah blah blah, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, yeah, I just love fucking with you guys. I don't know. Just the kind of person that I am. So yeah, I like doing that kind of stuff. I like writing, thinking about the reactions of other human beings and just having that impact in mostly a positive and good way, but not necessarily as long as I personally find it humorous. Is what I'm saying.
This isn't necessarily the same thing, but one of the things I like doing, and I've done it a bit in the realms, and it's going to be a lot in the new series, is basically being able to manipulate how the mechanics of the game world work. So it's almost like the magic behind the magic, and giving the main character a bit of a glimpse to how it works so they can break it in interesting ways. And quite often that's going to come down to basically resources. It's like, it's not going to be like a, get free resources thing, but it could be used to tweak how those resources are used or what they can do. And I find that kind of thing interesting. I don't know if it's the history major in me, because like Shemer says, food was the key to everything back in the day. So
okay. Do you find human or non-human cities building easier / move in intuitive?
I think it depends on the settings. I mean, if you're trying to replicate a modern city, then there's a lot of parameters you have to consider and be aware of and do a lot of research. So it's more complicated. But if, like me, you're writing about a simulated world inside a computer game, you can make up the rules as you go. So, it's much more simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, the dungeon world again, it's, that you need certain things in it. You know that you have to have these things, otherwise civilization doesn't work. But having dungeons means you can get around a lot of that. So you can sort of plan around it sort of goes for the non-human building side, because you can go, well, through this magical way, I can incorporate that. While building a proper human city, you need so much more. You need to build the things that you can't go straight to, I'm going to build nukes. You need to build from here to here to here to here to here to here to get to it. So yeah.
Right.
And you need bureaucracy, honestly, to make any real civilization. And that's mind-numbingly boring to talk about. It's like hanging out at the DMV. There was a story called The World Online, which was a great saga building story that I read from beginning to end. But like a full 30% of it is him like recruiting civil servants that are really good at arithmetic and whatever. And I would skip entire chapters because it's so accurately boring that you don't really want to go into it, right? So it's like, yeah, you got to give it a nod, but I mean, Jesus, you don't want to really think about, Edna and, such and such that has to get a stamp of approval. Otherwise, there's, 10% loss. I mean, it's boring. You don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, being human, allegedly, I think you would think, oh, that's easier to build a human city because I know what it's like. But then there's all these readers who tend to be human as well, who will probably go, well, I'm an engineer. That's not how that crap works.
That's how that works.
No. So, when you make up a city that's some other race, you could just basically say, well, that's what they do. You're just going to make it logical. Like if it's like in Shemer's case, it's goblins, you're not going to have like doorways that are 9 feet tall, which just wouldn't make sense unless you get a mutant goblin.
Yeah, I like something on each of the shores. People would be like, "Oh, you think you're going to do that without 3 cross checks from the Division of Parks and Labor? What about your GPA report?" I mean, like dealing with humans is I mean, I don't know.
Bureaucracy is what holds it all back.
Yeah,
definitely. Sounds more like the real world every day.
Yeah, nobody wants to see that.
When connecting your new town to your world, how long do you spend on its impact of the MC?
I don't, as I said before, I don't really plan for things. So my way of writing it is more of around the MC and how he does things or how they interact with the world. And then it's a case of when they need to do something or when they get a chance to do something, then it's a case of rather than planning out, like for the last sort of 6 days in game or whatever in the world, he's been going, I really need to build a farm, for example. Instead, it's just a case of he finally stops running, fighting, bleeding, and goes, right, what have I got the chance to do? I need to do something now. So it's all off the cuff rather than sort of planning on that side. So it's the connection from that side of things, the town to the world, is always what the main character needs right now, rather than what would fit with the greater world for me. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
For me, it's again looking at the town as a character itself, right? So it's like as the town evolves, then there's going to be an impact of what's happening with the town that the other characters are going to have to respond to, and then it's back and forth. And it's like when the characters do need something, just like Jez said, it's like, well, then how do you get the town to do that, and what are the roadblocks going to be in trying to get that done as well? So for me, it's a living, breathing thing. And I always kind of know that I want to go from point A to point B, but as I'm writing, I'm like, oh no, it'd make more sense that it would go to point C, and I follow that if that feels more true to the story.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to cause and effect too. Like if your MC does something that affects the town, that's going to change the town, and then it'll affect the main character in turn, often in ways that they don't expect, and then they've got to adapt to that. So it's like balance. It's a living organism. It's a character. You can't just go in and do a bunch of things that are going to change it and expect no backlash or reaction from it. So treat it like a character. I think that's the best thing. I think with it.
Yeah.
So I sometimes switch over to a different POV, like characters that are not part of the main story, who suddenly you see the settlement or the MC through their own eyes, and then you can get a fresh perspective on it. It also makes for a good, stopping point to build up suspense.
Yeah.
All right. What comes first? Do you create lore? Well, you guys answered most of that. Do you create lore for buildings and the world around it, or the other way around?
I mean, what Jez keeps referencing is the basic idea of, are you a panster or are you a plotter? It's like a plotter gets everything done 1,000% beforehand, blah, blah, and a pantser sort of flies by the seat of their pants and sort of, just writes whatever is coming out of them at a given point in time. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. It sounds like Chris is way more plotter and Jez is way more pantster. And
I used to be much more of a plotter because I came from a screenwriting background, and then I realized that I got bogged down more because I had these strict things that I had to follow. But once I realized that I could just let the story take me, then I know where I'm going. I just don't know how to get there.
Yep,
So
same here.
I threw the map out the window, but I know where I'm going.
Yeah, you need to listen to those voices inside your head.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm often telling
All
those voices to
17 of
shut.
them.
Just shh, guys. Tell the voices
I'm
just
trying to
shut
write
up.
here. Come on.
Exactly. Slow down. I missed that.
Down, yeah. I absolutely feel that way. I'm like, why isn't this getting out of my head faster right now? It's exhausting. Yeah.
It doesn't help that I used to be a welder, so my typing's like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's
I can
none of
occasionally
this.
get this finger in.
See, that's practice.
How does each author go about balancing building too much or too little in there? I also they are challenged. And give me a second. Sorry, the words are a little weird. All right. So how do you guys go about building your building balances? How do you balance out the effects of each building? Like if they have special effects for your town, and so it's not too OP in one area versus another area.
For me, it's a question of resource. I mean, a certain amount of resource will give you a building with roughly these abilities, or you can get a different building for about the same strength. And you need much more resource, much more rare materials to build something bigger. And the entire story progression is to get those resources, or it's part of the story, which gives you more options as you go along.
Yeah, I'd definitely say resource, because it's a case of, that you could build, for example, steel. You could build guns. You could give all of your characters guns and take over the local area. That's fantastic. But to be able to build the guns, you need to have iron mines. You need to have steel. You need to have an armory. You need to have all the various bits. So you need the resources first for it. So you sort of plan out that this is the amount of resources you can get right now. Well, all that you can afford for this, logically speaking, up to a certain point, is you could build these things. So if you could build just a barracks, well, what would the barracks be useful to you here, or would a chemistry lab be more useful to you? What could you find? And then looking at the resources in the local area, you think logically, would you be able to find anything that in chemistry, if you build this chemistry lab, would there be something that they would be able to do anything with? Is there going to be anything interesting in your area logically or not? Is it going to be a case if you're in the middle of the field? So, well, unless you like wheat, your chemistry lab ain't going to be doing much.
I mean, I think with mine, I designed just enough of the building to write what I'm writing, with a vague idea of how to progress from there if I need it. But I usually don't work out those details until I need them, and occasionally it does cause some problems where I'm like, crap, I should have made this way to make this more logical or simpler. But I think Shemer said sometimes when you're forced into a corner, it actually makes you come up with a solution that is often better than the one if it had been easy.
Right.
So
it forces innovation.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the resources obviously is huge, but I also think that like the environmental aspects of what you're doing can be amazing as well. Like, let's say that you're trying to get more food, so you have your guys fish, but then they're out there and like there's one guy waving, he's like, "Hey, we're getting fish," and then you just see like a massive shark like just tear him to pieces, and you're like, "Well, now I got to deal with this fucking shark." So then I got to get these like spears. So you're like, "Oh, we'll cut these down." But then there's these spiders that eat you when you go in the forest, and you're like, what the fuck is that? And I think that like as long as you are continuing to torture your characters, you're writing a really fun story, personally. So.
There's also that bit where you're writing and you're just going, just for God's sake, stop finding new things. Just
Exactly, right?
What you just do is just finish fishing, for God's sake.
How do you break away from fantasy tropes like Elvish Forests or Dwarven Mountains when creating settlements?
I was always a massive fan of Sir Terry Pratchett. So his different way of looking at the world, the way that sort of everybody is just slightly out, is always a thing for me. So whenever I look at things like forests, it's a case of the elves might be there, or the elves might have given up and gone, actually, I'd really like to live somewhere with, a pool and maybe a beach, nice bit of sand. So I always sort of take them the next step of where they would have gone and what would they really want. Do you want to live in a forest? I'd rather live by the beach.
I think just take one element and try to pervert it, or just turn it around. Like I had a elvish forest settlement building with people who worship nature and grew tree houses, but there were predatory shifters who killed everyone who got close and ate him. So that kind of broke the elf model.
They're not nice and wise though.
No.
Sound like fun elves at all.
Yeah, I think taking the common tropes and tweaking it works not just with this kind of aspect, but any aspect in fantasy or sci-fi. So that's take a trope, tweak it a little bit, and see where it takes you.
Yeah, I feel like the movie Bright did really fun stuff with that. So they had the elves that were all Rodeo Drive and whatever, and then they had the orcs that are basically just more thugs or doing whatever. And then one of the FBI guys goes, "When was the last time you saw an orc on the NBA? They don't have any vertical leap." And he's like, "That's not racist. I'm just saying." Blah blah blah. And I feel like you can take the tropes and then you inject anything new, and then it's fun. And then the whole thing is expansive. And it's not that you have to run away from it, because I personally like that there's the dwarves that are the miners and that the elves are sort of more in touch with nature. But then what does that mean? Does it mean they're peaceful druid kind of whatever? Or does it mean that they're eco-terrorists? I mean, I think there's a lot of things that you can do with it.
Mm-hmm. I think as long as you don't just stick with the standard tropes, you're good. Yeah. As long as you just like I say, take it from here, just take it to there and look at the world slightly differently, and it's much more fun.
Yeah.
Open yourself up to new things. Got it.
Yeah, don't say that around my wife.
After you finish writing a book with so much going on from start to finish, realize for your life of the MC of the story, very little time has elapsed or progressed. With that, have you thought of tackling the manipulation and time compression?
In early LitRPG, go.
I recently worked out that in the sort of my first series, it's about 1.5 million words now, and it covers about a month and a half to 2 months, and that's all. When I sort of realized it, I was like, that's really not very long. And having to go through and add in a bit more to train essentially, and saying, well, this is how you would do. But it's a case of if there's so much going on, it's literally you turn around and you go, how has all this happened in such a short period of time? It's
exactly.
Yeah.
I had to start including dates in the land simply because people were like, why hasn't this happened yet? I'm like, guys, it's been 3 months. They're like, but it's been 5 books. And I had to literally go back and put it in the chapter just to get people to stop yelling at me about it. I feel like George R. R. Martin ran into the same thing. I stopped reading those books when I realized that I'd read a book this thick. And I'm like, that was only half the characters. But when it gets that expansive, it is more difficult to sort of just force the time going on, because there's so many things you have to take care of. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, I had a real trouble trying to find ways to progress the time, because a lot of the building element, you write about building and a day passes and then you're stuck. You've already filled the pages about 1 day. What are you going to do? So when I get to this point and say, all right, let's go kill some shit, and then we form up a hunting party, get out of development, make a little tour, air up a little bit, kill some stuff, get back. A few days has passed, resources have accumulated by then, and you have more to go on from this point on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things I did not want to do was create a calendar, because I didn't want to have to try to keep track of all that. As for the time progression of the book, I had the Third Realms book. It's a time loop. So that basically it's Groundhog's Day with murder hobos. And I think if I actually went and analyzed it, the entire time that book takes is probably like 4 hours out of this guy's day. But because he keeps repeating it, and then the beginning part and the end part are him telling what's happened over the last day. And it's like, it didn't recur to me until after I finished it that I don't even think I had a full day in this book, and a lot of crap happens because he's stuck in a time loop. Plus, it was fun to run, or fun to write, rather.
I'll say something that was very, very present in like the very early days of LitRPG was that a lot of it used that sort of VR model, and then they sort of looked at the impact of that. Of if there was a time compression of like, 1 hour in real time was like 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours in VR. And just the massive impact that would have on society. I mean, imagine if like you logged into work remotely and you were able to work 4 times as much, or like, how does that change in your pay? How does it change in productivity? How does that change every single industry? How does it change educating your kids? I mean, like,
and would it make you go crazy? Because
and
is it 8 hours in that 1 hour really 1 hour physically and mentally, or is it 8 hours so you're working like 12 hours instead of 3?
I mean, that's something that if it ever happened in the real world would literally disrupt every single thing about it. I mean, because not only that, not even looking at productivity, but suddenly you can theoretically live the equivalent of 800 years. If it's an 8-to-1, sort of time compression, how many people are going to want to actually live in the real world when you're like, I'm dying so much faster now? And I think it's really interesting.
I would just go read a bunch of books.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can be in there
I'll be back
books,
in an hour, honey, and then come back and I read like 4 series.
Feels a bit much like the Matrix, just plug us in and keep us there forever. So
just clear your service is going to be really important. So
You'd just be like, you'd fall out with somebody, you go, all right, I'll come and I'll deal with you tomorrow. You'd plug yourself in and go, right, kung fu time. 12 hours of training just straight off.
Yeah, if you could upgrade yourself, you'd be way cooler in there than you'd be in real life.
Exactly.
There used to be a TV series, I don't remember the name, about a bunch of people who got kidnapped and are all brought back to the same times in the present. And there's the FBI guys who like try to chase them down and figure out everything. And like he encounters terrible events and fights and gets traumatized. So as a solution for that, they threw him into like a dreamscape where he lives to be for like 50 years and retires with kids and everything. And when it's over, only 1 minute has passed in real life, and he's got like a vacation and everything. And it's good to continue on the main story.
Yeah.
That was neat. Yeah.
And then there's the messed up movie Existence. Has anybody ever seen that?
Oh, it's awesome with the gun from a lobster.
Yeah. So it's like, Inception sort of messes it with it, where like you can go with a dream within a dream, kind of thing, but this is VR. But then the question is like, how do you know that once you go more than one layer down, how do you know that you're ever out? How do you know that you didn't go 3 layers down and you only came 2 up and you think this is the real world? And then it's just like, I mean, I don't think that I could process that idea. Imagine just always questioning your reality and, just not liking something and be like, I'll roll the dice. I'd rather
Are we even real right now? Is this reality? Are we reality?
Right?
Yeah. We're in someone else's dream right now.
Yeah, there's some jerk writing us all.
Yeah. I really have a word with the guy who would write me.
Yeah,
No problems.
Give me a better accent. Come on.
Let's see. When you guys write all these books, do you play a video game while you're writing the book?
I do on my sort of little breaks. So I write in sprints generally. So I do sort of like a 50-minute sprint, and then I have 10 minutes at the end of it. And if it's been a good one, every so often I'll let myself have sort of like half an hour or something on Civ 6 or something like that. And if it's been a bad one, I set myself a target of like 1,500 words, and then I have push-ups or weights or whatever at the end of it if I haven't hit that target. And God, it hurts.
So you punish yourself.
Yeah, well, it's in theory it's exercise because I'm literally sitting about all day now, so writing. But it's a case of it's like, right, well, I've only hit 1,000 words rather than 1,500, so that's 2 sets of 10 reps, whatever it is, and I find it works really well for me.
Yeah.
Keeps you
Because
right.
I'll find any excuse to not do those weights.
I mean, imagine if you just gave yourself some dick punches, then you much longer book. I mean, that'd be amazing.
I'll be just
Yeah. It'd be like you're running out.
write faster, write faster.
Come on!
I already forgot what the question was.
Whether we game or not.
Yeah,
I've actually kind of gotten away from it a little bit. I haven't played much lately, which makes me feel like a bad LitRPG author.
Yeah, you need to complete a full book in 1 month, or otherwise, you can't keep up. Yeah.
I mean, I used to say that the worst part about being a LitRPG author is that you don't have time to read lit or play RPGs because you're just, you're creating all the time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I always have movies and stuff on in the background. Honestly, I'm pretty sure I have undiagnosed ADD. So being able to focus on more than one thing at a time actually increases my productivity. So.
Yeah, I need to focus on just one thing. Because if I reward myself with gaming too often, then it's just sort of like, I really want to game again, and it's suddenly I've got nowhere near my target for the week.
Yeah, it can be a struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially as you say with Civ, because half an hour or an hour of Civ is 30 seconds in the game.
Yeah.
You've achieved
They literally say, "Don't you want one more turn?" And I'm like, "You guys are the devil."
Bastards, you know me too well.
They're like heroin pushers.
Yeah.
Because you always want it. Would you build a bard's college?
No, because bards are generally horny bastards, and then nothing else would get done.
I am so musically untalented that I would feel like a fraud attempting to even write a bard character, much less create a college.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah.
What kind of college would you guys build? Like a magic college then? Or would you do
Probably
I love
physical
Wizards
training.
Towers.
college? Like this?
Yeah, I love Wizards Towers. I think there's a lot that you can do with various floors of it. There's a lot you can do with harnessing the power and how maybe sucking it in, and then what are the consequences of that. Again, I'm big into sort of environmental effects kind of thing. So yeah, I've been into that.
How do you portray village town first impressions, especially if your main character has already been to a few towns or villages?
Probably the walk up, just sort of as they arrive. It's the things that stand out to you, because we all see when you go anywhere, you go on holiday, you fly to wherever or whatever. As you walk out, it's always that first impression that you get. Whether it's that god awful smell that you sometimes get when you first walk off the plane and you go, "Where the hell am I?" Or whether it's the heat or the things that you see, the thing that stands out in the distance.
I
think if you go to a village and you see, I don't know, like 4 8-year-olds with stood on their faces going to work a day in the mines, you're like, this is a fucked up place that I don't want to hang out. I think that's
turn around, go away.
Yeah,
Northeast of England.
No.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot like describing a character you meet for the first time. Like Jess said, your first impression are the most important thing, and then you can, sink a little bit deeper into the details.
I tend to usually introduce the first thing that actually ends up being the most important structurally or plot-wise. It's whether it's hinted at, but it's always going to be there in that first scene where so basically if you're reading my books and you show up to a place for the first time, pay attention because that thing's going to come back. To me, you could set up the vibe of the town around the important element, I think. And especially since a lot of times I'm making it up as I go along. It's just, I know as long as I know what I have to make important, then the other stuff just kind of comes. And then usually surprises me and creates subplots that I didn't know I wanted to write, and then get stuck writing those. And there's that rabbit hole.
How close do y'all think humanity is to getting a full VR to work and having legit worlds? Would any of you authors jump in as soon as possible?
I don't think I would ever be the first guy to do stuff. I'd be like, Jez, there's this amazing thing. You gotta.
Yeah, let's see if it fries his brain, and then if it doesn't, cool.
Exactly.
Would you be able to tell the difference, really? I think we're not that far away in some respects. The conversation we had last night about Richard Morgan, about the Altered Carbon books, I can see that on the horizon, really. You know, with the chip at the back of the brain to record you, whether it is you that gets uploaded to a new body or not is a totally different conversation. But if you could download that memory, that the experience that makes you, to yourself at least, then you could upload it into something else just as easily. I think there will be in the next few years at least some attempts at that. I mean, Elon's working on stuff at the moment with it, but how far it goes is the next question, really, because you'll never know if it's definitely right until you try and spin that copy back up and see what happens.
Yeah.
But
If you
I'll be up for
consider
it.
technology like in Ready Player One, when it's just basically VR goggles and haptic suit, I think we're about at the stage that the technology exists. It's just a matter, to mash it all together to a single concept, because we have the automatic treadmills, the multi-directional treadmills, and haptic clothing and VR, but you need some, big shot to put them all together and create a virtual world that can work through that.
And figure out how to make it economical.
Yeah.
I mean, without getting into like conspiracy stuff, I mean, I personally feel like the tech that is widely available and widely known is not the tech, the maximum amount of tech that has been invented to a certain extent. Because that just makes logical sense to me that you would not share out. I mean, we know that every country is always in a race technologically, so that's not sort of a curiosity. And also, I think that people are like, look at what we've built, and it's like, it's not we. It was one nerd that figured this shit out, and then everyone took, credit for it. Like it's like scientific advancement is not a linear line. It's a bunch of starts and stops that, because there's 8 billion people, it now looks like a linear line. But yeah, it just takes one person that randomly figures it out, and then boom, the world's gonna change. So
yeah. It's always that one guy who's been up since like 4 a.m. who's like 6 cans of Red Bull in and a lot of cocaine, who just goes, "Whoa, what if we did this?"
I mean, exactly, right?
And his boss later on going, "Yeah, well done, mate. So, boss, you know what I've just
came up with exactly." Yeah. I mean, rocket fuel was invented by mistake. Viagra was invented by mistake. I mean, there's everything is invented by mistake.
Yeah.
And then it's probably not even for what they thought they were inventing. And they just somebody like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, fuck lower blood pressure. Like, harder dicks. It's gonna change the world.
Can you imagine that one? Sort of the tests. The people who were sort of like the guinea pigs who were getting this in the human trials. They're going, "Look, doc, I don't know how to tell you this, but the blood pressure feels, it's all right, but the wife's much happier."
We need to figure out how it's going to work on humans. Look, I can't tell you how I know, but it works great.
So we're about out of time, guys, and I just want to thank Jez, CM, Shemer, and Aleron for being here with us today. Is there anything anybody wants to say about any upcomings coming up? Any more?
It's been good fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been great topic.
Yeah.
All right.
They're going to continue.
See you guys.
They got to continue it on Discord. My code word is getting lit. That's getting space and lit. So you want to continue the conversation on Discord? We'll be on Discord, and I think we're good for the day, guys.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys. Thanks for
Thank you,
having
guys.
me.
Thanks for tuning in, anybody.
Thank you, guys. Great talking to you.
Nice.
Bye.